We want to get back to Bedford and what makes it special. And Bedford County is just north of the Mason Dixon Line. And during slavery, it was one of the first encounters of freedom land that many of the slaves encountered.
This is one of those stories that you probably have not heard before. You haven't heard the whole story. That's why we kind of like doing these Your Towns. This is a story about Chaneysville. It's just a short drive from where we're standing right now. In fact, we traveled off the beaten path, literally. We went through a makeshift grass road to bring you the story of the Chaneysville Incident and the slaves who decided that freedom through death was much, much better than life as a servant.
A tattered American flag blows in the breeze, waving at half-mast in honor of the horror story buried deep in these grounds.
The slaves, 17 of them, I think, supposed to be buried.
Alton Iames is a member of the family that's owned this land in southern Bedford County for generations. It's said to have been one of the stops on the Underground Railroad.
Underground Railroad supposed to went right along base of this here.
According to town folklore, between 12 and 17 slaves stopped right here in Chaneysville.
They knew that the people were chasing them and that they were closing in, and that I've heard different stories where one is that they asked the Iames to kill them, and the other is that they killed themselves because they didn't want to be caught. They didn't want to go back down south.
Nothing here has been stripped off so many times.
The graves were never fancy, just pieces of river rock that were used to mark the spots where the bodies were put. Nobody's sure which markers are for members of the Iames family or the runaway slaves, and that's been a real problem, validating the historical value of this hallowed ground.
Basically just oral tales. We have a few things that were written, but mostly it was just told from generation to generation. We haven't found any more documentation.
In 1981, David Bradley, who grew up in Bedford, published a book called The Chaneysville Incident, a fictional account of the slave family.
A lot of people heard about it from the book.
People started flocking here to pay their respects.
You can sign in, leave a note, and we have had people from all over the United States.
But even Bradley says he's not sure if the story is true.
The only story that came to me came from my mother.
He lives out of state now, but says his mom discovered the tale in town.
Most things about black people in general and slaves in particular were not written down, especially in places like Chaneysville and the South County. How they died, well, they're dead because they're buried. We don't know. It's a matter of legend and speculation.
So then, what is the Chaneysville Incident?
It's a story about something that might have happened. It's a different view of history than we are taught in school books. Things weren't just easy. Things were sometimes deadly.
Now, historians have actually tried to get that graveyard designated as a National Historic Landmark, but honestly, because there is really no documentation, that's been rejected several times. Still, the people who live in Bedford, they are convinced that the story is true, or at the very least, it is based on truth. And